Hello, hello, hello. Yeah. Hi, everybody. We are about to start, so please, if you can take seats. Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you for what I think is the last session of the day, at least in this room. Thank you also for the energy to stay until the end. My name is Juan Pablo Solis. I'm from Fairtrade International. And I'm delighted to welcome you all to the session that we have entitled Business a Fair Carbon Food System, How Food Can Tackle Emissions for Low Carbon Tomorrow. And with me, I have Deborah Osei Mensah. She's a cocoa producer from Ghana, but also our Fairtrade ambassador. Also, we have Ines Saidi. She's part of a company in Tunisia, a Dutch Tunisian company that is also Fairtrade certified, producing vegetables in an amazing way that she will explain. Also, I have Nera van der Rest. Nera is from FairClimateFund, one of the lead organizations in the Netherlands that are developing initiatives to support a low carbon food system. And Dr. Olivia Henke from the Alliance for Development Climate in Germany, that is also going to share with us today her messages regarding how to build sustainability, but also co-benefits, and include the private sector perspective into that conversation. Let me start very briefly, next one please, by explaining why from Fairtrade we work on carbon markets and what is our, let's say, aspiration here. Next one, please. Fairtrade climate and environmental strategy have one ultimate goal, and is to support producers and workers to increase their capacity, therefore they can cope with environmental risks and strengthen their climate resilience. We see in the carbon market still work to be done to make the carbon market more fair. I think in the session before ours, there was a reference to, let's say, building a resilience carbon credit kind of. These are ideas that we think are relevant for empowering producers to cope with environmental risks. It's about promoting greener fairness, inclusiveness, but also human and environmental rights in the core of the discussions of the carbon market. Next one, please. In that sense, in 2015, we launched in COP in Paris our first climate standard. The standard offered several, let's say, unique selling points, like, for instance, democratic and transparency, local empowerment of those that are generating these carbon credits, a minimum fair trade price, a standardized practice in all fair trade certified products, and finance for adaptation, what we call a climate premium that is used for adaptation. And also through our producer networks, we provide capacity building to producers and communities that wants to involve in generating these such initiatives. And at the end, the climate standard also includes a chapter for end buyers and how they can commit in reduction plans to also lower their footprint. Next one, please. So in very simple terms, the Fairtrade Climate Standard works based on project activities that are that takes clean development mechanisms within the analysis of, let's say, the emission reductions. These emission reductions are verified with the social integrity provided by the gold standard. And then we go on top of that, like an add-on on top of gold standard, to ensure fairness in trading carbon credits. We did an analysis, next one please. We did an impact analysis of cases, projects around the world that are implementing these fair trade carbon credit mechanisms, implementing the fair trade climate standard in India, Ethiopia, Uganda, Burkina Faso, Peru, and Lesotho. Next one, please. And to give you just a glimpse of what these projects are about, most of these projects are related to 3 requirements established by gold standard. This one, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and reforestation and afforestation. Up to date, projects type are, for instance, improved cook stoves, biogas installations, reforestation, and agroforestry initiatives. We have been reaching out around 66,000 smallholder producers in the countries that I mentioned, generating around more than 600,000 CO2 equivalents traded in the market. These have generated more than €7 million for the communities that are being trading these carbon credits in the market. Next one, please. One of the case studies was Ghana, and in Ghana, there's an initiative. This one is very particular. It is a project that is not selling the carbon credits in the market. It's more like insetting, but it's a good connection. I wanted to use this example because it connects what happens at farm level, what the expectations of the traders and the end market are also interested in cooperate. The case in Ghana is implementing forestry and agroforestry cocoa projects, and to date, the estimation is that these initiatives have reduced 75,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. And again, as I mentioned, it's an incentive project in partnership between a company, a cocoa company called Chocolate Salva, with the support of other retailers like the Co-op, International Trade Center, Max Havelaar, Switzerland, and ICCO, and the Swiss Platform for Sustainable Cocoa. Next one, please. At this moment, we have experienced different challenges for producers. These ones are, for instance, producers need to increase their participation and get empowered. We also are seeing that for producers, understanding the dynamics of the carbon market is not always easy. And also the volatility in the carbon market. Therefore, our minimum price helps as a safeguard also in this sector. But there's also this question about how to secure economic benefits from the carbon market, and how lack of climate change resilience is affecting producing livelihoods. Therefore, with me, I have Deborah and Ines. So I would like to ask first Deborah, based on this case study in Ghana and the experience that you are, I know that you are not part of the project per se, but actually it's interesting for me to see that you have amplifying the scope of the project in your own community with your own SPO. So Deborah, how has been the experience implementing this such as initiative like dynamic agroforestry systems in cocoa production in Ghana?
Yeah, thank you, Pablo. I'm really happy to be here and pleased to be part of this panel discussion. As a producer and then a lead of about 10,000 producers, cocoa producers in Ghana, a Sunafo Cocoa Farmers Union, we believe and understand that for us to be sustainable, we also have to look at the practices we do on our farms. And then also it's very necessary to start new farms. And then with our understanding in climate change, we also know and realize at a point our practices on our farm contribute to emission. So even though we are not directly benefiting from the Sankofa project, as a farmer union, we've learned and adapt that system in a way that we train, educate our farmers and support them to practice the dynamic agroforestry system. And so what farmers do is we are looking at in every plot of land when a farmer is starting a farm. Let me say that at the initial stage, we were looking at taking actions to be adaptive and then resilient to climate. So we started with a traditional agroforestry where we do planting of trees on our farms. But we realized that wasn't the best practice. So then we had to move to the dynamic agroforestry. And so with that, we are looking at increasing the trees on the farms. We also look at going organic, using no chemical at all, and then also zero tillage when we are starting our cocoa farms. And then also we do intercrop of cocoa with other products. We do have food crops, plantain, we have cassava, a lot yam. We also do fruit crops, pear, we do mango, we do orange. We intercrop with our cocoa on the same piece of land. And then we make sure that we also introduce a leguminous plant that also affects a lot of nutrients in the soil. And then the experiences so far is initially, before we were introduced to this dynamic agroforestry system, we normally experience a high mortality rate of our small seedlings, cocoa seedlings, due to a warmer weather. But because this dynamic agroforestry technically introducing other trees, there's a lot of shade for our cocoa, and so currently we are having a high survival rate of our cocoa seedlings. Also, farmers are getting diversified income because they get the chance, the opportunity to sell the food products, and then also in future benefit from the carbon credit as well. And then also with food security in mind, we have enough food to feed the household, and then also for commercial purpose. And then also, this is an avenue that has also created opportunities for youth as well, because looking at having organic fertilizers in place, looking at biomass, it's also a good opportunity for us to introduce our youth into innovative activities to support this dynamic agroforestry system. And then another project we are also looking at is involving women in leadership, because we see women as a rapid cause of change when it comes to programs. And so we enroll women into leadership schools, and so they take the lead in this adaptation method. And then in the household, we are not only looking at reducing emission on the farm, we also look at our households, because in our communities, we depend so much on firewood, there is smoke, and so we look at using improved cook stove, where we use a small amount of wood, and so our dependence on forest products are reduced, and then also the smoke, the health of our farmers are also improved. And then we also add on to the forest monitoring program by Fairtrade, where we also monitor to make sure our farmers are not encroaching into the forest, but rather where their farms are, they are trying as much as possible to improve the system there. So currently, with a map of the 10,000 farmers that we have a very good picture that all our farmers are outside the reserves, and they are also planting a lot of trees to make sure they also improve upon reducing emission and other things. So these are some of the experiences, and with all this, we're also looking at sustainability of the sector, because once our soils are improved, we are not using a lot of agrochemicals, we are also improving the survival rate, then we are also looking at a sustainable sector for our farmers, because that is their livelihood, and so we need to protect that livelihood. This is some of the benefits our farmers have gotten from the dynamic agroforestry. But of course, it's a few out of the many farmers. And so we always hope that we get that funding to extend to reach a lot of farmers to make more impact as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. I think that the main lesson here is that, producers are already adopting practices that help them have lower footprint at the region. And in that same sense, in Fairtrade, we have standards for smallholder producers and standards for plantations and high labor organizations. And now I want to invite Ines, because she represents the voice of workers. And workers here, workers that are in the food system, are also implementing practices that help improve their resilience and react to climate change. So Ines, can you tell us about the experience of your organization in Tunisia?
Thank you, Pablo.
and thanks for the opportunity to be for the panelists. So I'm Ines, I'm coming from Tunisia, and I represent producer of cherry tomato. The south of Tunisia is very disadvantaged place. There, the temperature is very high, and in the summer it can be more than 45, and very windy, and it's in the door of the desert. The water is, the poverty and the scarcity of the water there is very common. So for us as producer, and because we, as well, we are Fairtrade certified, we align in the same, that we share the same vision about the environment fairness and the climate justice. So we tried by several actions to implement that. So we produce in closed greenhouses first to mitigate the temperature. To mitigate the high temperature, we use the fog system, so to decrease the temperature inside the greenhouse and to have better produce and better quality. For the water scarcity, we do drilling, so we optimize the use of water. And for the energy, for example, we try to do, we install the solar panel, then we have renewable energy instead of electricity. So, and in 2023, we are going to install the desalination plant, is to extract the seawater and to use it instead of digging wells and use the phreatic nap. So, we calculate our footprint, and we, as a result, we found that to produce 1 kilogram of cherry tomato, we are lower by 68% from a Dutch high-tech greenhouse. So we are producing in clean, safe environment. We tried as well to raise many awareness about environment, so to ensure that our workers as well are trained and implicated on that. So we ban the use of plastic in the workplace. So we give cloth bags, you know, it's trendy now, the use of cloth bags, so to minimize the use of plastic. And then we try to select our garbage and to do management of our waste in a way to limit the pollution inside the workplace. So by these several actions, we try to mitigate the climate change. As well, we are doing forest creation. So by garden, and Tunisia is very well known by olive trees. So to ensure that we can mitigate the erosion of soil, and by that the olive tree is a good option. So by these several actions, we try to implicate all the workers and managers and all the intervenants of these actions to mitigate the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Ines. So with these two testimonies, you more or less have a picture of what type of actions are happening at the region. But the food system compliance invites multiple other partners, and therefore the footprint of the food system is important to analyze. So I now want to invite Nira from FairClimateFund to tell us a bit more about science-based target initiatives, the Scope 3, how emission reductions could also potentially benefit and amplifying this initiative in the ground. Nira?
Yeah. Thank you, Juan Pablo. And my name is Nera van der Geest. I'm director of FairClimateFund, and we are one of the big supporters of the Fairtrade climate standard as from the beginning. We are a social enterprise, and we try to make the carbon markets work for farmers for households. And I have heard a lot about carbon markets and about the inequity in the carbon markets and the injustice. And I think with this carbon standard that Fairtrade International has launched in the Paris Agreement in 2015, they did a good step in making it more fair and inclusive. So a brief about, next slide please. A little bit about our company. Next slide please. We are actually a part of an NGO, international NGO, and our mission is to bring carbon markets and to improve livelihoods. So to bring carbon funding to the people who are hit most by climate change. That is also part of our mission of Cordaid, who is our owner. And we invest in climate projects that benefit the people. So we really focus at helping households and bring the money to where it is needed most. And we're not per se focusing on farmers, but if you look at rural areas where the impact of climate change is felt most, you see that most of the households do farming. So we actually have two birds with one stone. So we focus on clean cooking solutions at household level. Next slide, please. So we all know about the climate injustice, because where the most emissions take place is in the north, in the northern countries, where we have all energy to we can use all types of energy. And if you see how much emissions we have in the north and compared to the African countries, you see in this picture that where the red parts are, where the highest impact is on productivity for food, is in the countries that don't contribute to climate change. You probably all know it, but it is good to take into your mind that the food security is impacted by climate change by people who do not contribute to climate change themselves. So you see Burkina Faso, for example, it's not even a ton per person per year that they emit. So it is really good to realize that. So we go for the next slide, please. Next slide. Here you see the contribution of our food systems to carbon emissions and the worldwide total emissions that we face. And you see here that our carbon footprint of the food systems that we have implemented, and that is not the local food production, this is international food systems, where we trade and produce foods and transport it all over the world. And you see that it is a considerable part of the footprint. You see that 29% is caused by our food system. And just to show a little bit of the figures around some of the products that we produce and like to eat a lot, it's like beef with 60 tons per kilogram product, which is very high. Coffee, I like coffee, but it is also emitting a lot of carbon emissions. And compared to rice and corn, which are lower, but still, if you add to your whole, on our side of the world, where we already have a big footprint, it is also caused by our food system. So this is to indicate a bit how our footprint is built up. Next slide, please. So what do we do in that space as a FairClimateFund? To make the bridge to our work, we want to bring carbon finance to the people who need it most, to improve their livelihoods and to build their own food security. So there are two sides of the coin. I just explained about the footprint we have and about the food insecurity that is there in many African countries. And here you see also the two sides of the coin, being at the top side of the graph, you see how we should reduce our carbon footprint and also our footprint in order to prevent extra disasters for the future. So what you need to do, if you work in the voluntary carbon market, you should really promote to be clear about your footprint, to realize how much it is, to calculate your footprint, and first of all, reduce your carbon emissions when you produce and eat food. So make choices with lower footprints. If you are a company, for example, in the food sector, you also need to not just buy offsets. I think that is one of the takeaways from this COP, that you don't need to buy carbon credits just to be climate neutral or whatsoever. You need to set serious targets to reduce your footprint. And I realize, like Ines gave a nice example, if you focus on your emissions, you can really reduce tomatoes to a large extent, which is a great example, and we should all do that. What we think that companies should also do is put an internal price on their carbon emissions and translate that into, first of all, reduction targets, but also realize that there are people on the planet that don't have access to the funding. We talked about it in the previous session, market-based mechanisms, and please, all those companies should also first reduce, but also set aside some money to invest in good carbon projects to compensate the residual carbon footprint they have at this moment. And the last one is that there should be a further, choose a quality project. And I think that we aim at having a very high standard in carbon projects. Next slide, please. So what is actually the fair side of fair carbon standards? And Juan Pablo explained it already. But what we see is that in the building up of the price of a carbon credit, normally they're traded for the lowest cost and they're traded many folds amongst companies. And the stories about the impacts they realize are there, but the stories not always drop down into financial allocation of the funds. And what the Fairtrade climate standard does is to really make transparent how the financial flows, what is covered in the price of the carbon credit. And a fair price is paid, that means a minimum price, which is absolutely unique in the market. It is really reaching the people that are most impacted by climate change. And a very good positive thing, I feel, is the premium. And if you look at the premium payment, after the credits are generated, the buyers, they pay a premium for the producers of the carbon credits. And the carbon credit producers are the households. So they are the owner of the credits. And I think that is a very important fact. And if you look at the orange part of this graph, you see it is quite limited at this moment. But talking about food security and climate resilience, we have the ambition to make this amount much higher, so that if you buy a carbon credit with a high quality product, you also pay for biodiversity conservation and also for adaptation measures. So you also build climate resilience in the farmers who produce these carbon credits. So that is key for us. And I think talking about farmers and resilience and livelihoods, we should double this premium or maybe triple or have it like $25 and have half of it going to the communities that can build their own resilience because of the inequality of the food system and the climate system that we have created, actually. Next slide, please. So I want to explain one example. We heard two very nice examples, but one is in Burkina Faso, where you know Burkina Faso is in sub-Sahara Africa. It is drought prone. There is a lot of overuse or over exploitation of the land. So the organic matter in the soil is very low. So there is a real threat. We have there a project in which we integrate the approaches I just mentioned using carbon finance. And that is, so we use the carbon markets. We implement clean cook stoves for the households in order to reduce wood for cooking, which is one of the major sources of deforestation. We give them access to microfinance and the premium they can use for the adaptation work. We paid the first premium already. And in the climate, we also bring a lot of knowledge to the households by building capacities in the villages with local organizations. So that is the climate angle of it. And we want to integrate it, and in this project we did, the Birds, Bees and Business, we have also implemented value chain development for local communities to be able to improve their own crops, be trained on agroecological farming techniques that also serve the profitability of their crops, that stores organic matter in the soil. So all types of measures that help the livelihoods to be more climate resilient and have higher productivity for their food crops. And the last, which is not the least, I would say, biodiversity is in the heart of all of it. So the bees stand for the biodiversity conservation, and biodiversity is at the heart of the productivity of the land as well. So this is a project around shea trees. Shea is a nut that is collected, and the productivity increases enormously if you have bees in the area where you work. So the diversity improves enormously. So we have integrated these approaches, and most of it is funded by the premium that we got on the credits. And if you look at this project, a part of it is funded by donors, but the only continuous activity could be the climate intervention because of the continuous sales of the carbon credits that drops down in the household communities. So it is a way to give also financial sustainability. Next slide, please. So this is concluding. We promote fair and inclusive carbon markets. Two sides. One is to reduce the footprint of our food systems, to have very serious reduction targets and really implement them. And do that in scope 1, 2, and 3. You spoke about 1, 2, and 3. Scope 3 is actually the value chain emission that is included in your product that you eat every day. And scope 3 is like 95% of the carbon emissions. So it should really be involving the scope 3. And on the other hand, you have to invest, like I said, in serious and good, high-quality carbon projects. And the other side, the local communities, we really have to consider the households in Africa as owner of the credits. And it's good to realize that there is something in the hands of the farmers that could be monetized and used as income-generating activity. So we, well, this is the two sides of the same coin, in which I think the Fairtrade climate standard is a very good tool to bring money to local farmers, pay for mitigation, but also for adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nira. Now we have had, like, again, the perspective of producers, the perspective from workers, the perspective from the carbon market. What about companies and what about policymakers? Dr. Henke, From the Alliance, what type of recommendations in Germany you are promoting in the conversations with corporations and also with the government?
Thank you, Juan Pablo. Hello to everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. As Juan Pablo mentioned, I'm here representing a foundation which is called Foundation Development and Climate Alliance, and it was funded by the German Development Ministry, the BMZ. Next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. All of us here know what was agreed upon in 2015 with the Paris Agreement and the Agenda 2030. It was milestone commitments, we all know that. But there is room for a lot more of ambition and also fairness in the carbon markets. We need to accept the fact that the government measures are not enough to stop global warming, and such as the private sector must complement the efforts by doing all they can voluntarily as well. That is why the BMZ has funded the Alliance. We promote carbon offsetting in addition to avoidance and mitigation of greenhouse gas emissions and support offsetting. Next slide, please. And we support carbon offsetting with the highest certification standards. And at the same time, we want to promote to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah, what we actually do is we give access to various carbon offset projects about the offset partners that meet the highest certification standards, and all of our partners want to achieve climate neutrality and at the same time implement the SDGs, to have more environmental protection on the one hand and to support better living conditions for people in developing and emerging countries. Next slide, please. I think that contributions and recommendations at our foundation can make is by financing carbon projects. There we can provide a way to finance projects, Nira has mentioned that already, and reduce global carbon emissions with these projects. We can support the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement, and we can support people that are most impacted by climate change. But to fulfill all this, we have to pay a fair price for these carbon credits. Only with a fair price we can really support SDGs and the local communities. And we can build a fair system for carbon markets by paying a fair price, and prices at the moment are way too low. Next slide, please. From our perspective as a foundation, there are certain quality criteria for the projects in the carbon markets and recommendations we can give. I think general requirements for the projects are that they should be additional and that the permanence of the project should be there. The avoidance of carbon leakage is another important fact, and also the measurement, the monitoring and the external verification of the emissions by an independent validation is needed. Transparency for the carbon credits within registration and retirement of the certificates should be there, and all the projects should support the local communities in the development countries. Next, please. Yeah, and from our perspective, from the foundation, there is always a positive contribution to impact the SDGs. And now we are here at the COP, and so double counting of the emissions under Article 6 is an important fact, and we should be aware that double counting is something we should focus on in the next years. And environmental and social management safeguards should be there, and focus that there are no harm done for the local communities. We have recently conducted a study together with the ICCO Institute, which is an institute in Germany that shows that carbon projects if they are done right and fulfill this criteria, put less pressure on ecosystems, such as forests and water systems, that there are time and money savings for the local communities, for the families' incomes, and if their energy efficiency is energy savings, and those positive impacts for the local communities can be supported by financing the carbon projects, but the social aspects of the projects, such as the stakeholder consultations, has to be respected as well. Next slide, please. Yeah, we have here an overview of quality criteria within our alliance, and we really support the gold standard for the global goals. You can see here VCS plus CCBS, also Sustainable Development Verified Impact Standard, as well as the Fairtrade carbon credits. That are those we are focused on if we talk about high quality in the carbon markets. Next slide, please. I would like to close my input with some key features about the carbon markets. I think there's a significant part of the supply chain value has to remain at the producer level within the carbon markets. We can promote regenerative agriculture, build resilience at a grassroots level, reduce the dependency on chemical fertilizers, improve soil health profile, and there's a potential of significant carbon sequestrations and avoidance. And yeah, to say it last but not least again, more trade justice to the carbon markets with better prices. And I hand back to Juan Pablo.
Thank you, Doctor. So, if I hear them well, yeah, there's a lot of criticisms in the carbon market. There's a lot to be done to build a fair carbon market and to support from the carbon market, provide support and right incentives to also for the transformation of food systems. But it's also about the how the projects are setting up. I think, Nera, you said it. And what kind of mechanisms can enable a fair share of the risks associated, no? And how, therefore, we can ensure a human rights perspective in the carbon market as well. I have like a couple of reflections after hearing the panelists. One that comes to my mind often is how to move to, therefore, some sort of decarbonization in the global supply chain. How different partners along the supply chain can collaborate to make trade also decarbonize the emissions in trade. Another big question in my mind right now is how to strengthen the co-benefits. I think, Dr. Henke, you mentioned about it's not just the carbon credit, it's about the co-benefits that are around the carbon credits. So how we can strengthen those co-benefits among producers and the communities. And the third reflection that I had is how to leverage the partnership to develop these collaborations and therefore enhance outreach, increase outreach, increase scale. Now I want to open a bit the floor for questions, remarks, comments. Yep. One hand over there.
Hi. So I'm Claire Willers from Gold Standard. So thank you very much for this presentation. For us, working with Fairtrade, it's a no-brainer. So in terms of the carbon markets, Gold Standard can bring the safeguards and can bring the integrity and bring all the additionality and the things that were discussed in your last presentation. But the part that Fairtrade can bring is really looking at that equality element and looking at how to drive finance from carbon markets back into those the local communities where those projects are being developed. So that's a no-brainer. And the other thing I really love about this Fair Climate Standard is the fact that the mitigation then finances adaptation. So part of the carbon finance that goes back, part of it is used for adaptation in and around the local community. And I think that's a really unique way to use mitigation to drive funding into adaptation. And it's something that's not seen very often in carbon markets. And I think it's a real positive step forward and a use case of how this can work and work positively. I do have a question. So there was talk about challenges and barriers, and there's talk about low carbon prices. And so when the standard was first launched in 2015, there was low carbon prices at that point. With the recent growth of the market, I'd like to get your thoughts on whether the recent growth and a recent increase in prices, whether that's had a positive contribution to your producer communities, or whether we still need to kind of up and increase that price to make it fair. Thank you.
Do you want to take that? Yeah.
No, it's a very good question to look at who is benefiting from these markets. And if you look at the rising prices, it's not per se coming back to, I mean, if you use the Fairtrade climate standard, we talk about benefit sharing if the market goes up. And there is a minimum price to safeguard the income of the farmers. So we share the benefits if the market would go up a lot and also give more premium back to the producers. But on average, if you talk with carbon developers, it's not logical at all to share benefits. I mean, I spoke to someone today who also by implementing cook stoves was not, I mean, there is not an option that the household who purchase a cook stove gets also the benefit of the carbon credits. It's not done on average. It's only done with the Fairtrade climate standard. So it is a gold standard project, sorry, but it is not per se channeling back the income of the carbon markets back to the producers. And so the answer is no, there is no real benefit sharing when the prices go up and the profits remain in all the partners involved and not often drop back to the producers. But you can do more for benefit sharing. There is more room for benefit sharing at this moment. That's true.
If I can just comment on that. Part of the analysis on the impact assessment said that at this moment, well, when the standard was launched in 2015, we had one big assumption, one big aspiration to increase income for farmers and communities, no? Like generate an extra income, diversification, and so forth. What we have experienced is that, unfortunately, the market has not responded because of the market situation, the prices in the market over the past 5 years. The situation has changed, I think, after Glasgow, a bit the global awareness that has been raised over the past 2 years, I think. But still, we don't have sufficient evidence to prove that a hypothesis of higher income for producers, for the income diversification. And it's one of the biggest question marks that producers are asking us, whether even with the minimum price, are these carbon credits generating a living income for them as well, no? So that's some of the things that we are also consider in the revision of the standard that is going to happen towards the end of this year and beginnings of the next year. Another question from the audience, or maybe another experience. I'm seeing Paul here, also a colleague of ours from Fairtrade Africa. So Paul, maybe you have the mic if you want to share your experience.
Thank you. By name, I'm Paul Ayalo from Fairtrade Africa. I have an experience similar to what my colleagues have shared. I'm not in the food system, but in the agriculture system. So we are having support from our commercial partners, and we are implementing projects in line with the adoption of the clean energy within the flour farm. So what we are doing so far is we've set up a fund. So this is called a Sustainable Clean Energy Fund to enable the workers. This is in the hired labor setup, not the small producer. So we have set up a fund to enable the workers to access clean energy solutions, including clean cooking and also for the lighting for their household. So my question is, you talked of the core benefits. How can this kind of initiative link into the fair carbon system? Because we are having the workers accessing the clean energy products which are already registered into some other related carbon credit schemes. Like now the improved biomass cook stoves. We also have technologies like solar, which we may find that they already registered into some other carbon credit schemes. Then another issue is now with the community. We are having or we investing funding to support the communities in terms of awareness creation to be able to understand further on the benefits rising from adopting clean energy solutions. So could this also be quantified as a contribution towards the fair carbon emission or the fair carbon credit benefits? Then in terms of now the companies, we are working with the producers themselves to roll out initiatives reducing their carbon emissions. Like now, Asima flour setup, they use a lot of energy. Instead of them using, let's say, for example, electricity from the grid, they are setting up the solar systems to using their cooling system and also maybe to pump water. So could this be considered when you talk of the fair carbon credit initiatives?
Thank you for your question, Paul. Talking about the last part, carbon credits cannot cover the cost of all the interventions. Therefore, it's just not, the prices are not yet high enough. But what I foresee that the other co-benefits will become more tangible in the future. I think everyone is working on very clear impacts that the projects generate, like on gender or on the SDGs. So I see in the future that if you deliver a certain co-benefit, that it will be monetized and that you can include that in your price because you show that you deliver to that impact. So and I think the gold standard is a very good example for that, that the SDGs are integrated into the standard. The gold standard is working on that already, which is a great thing. But the price of the carbon credit cannot, I mean, for solar panels, for example, on your firm, that is something that would not be able to pay from these. Our approach is to help low-income households, and this would be something for the entrepreneur to do in their carbon reduction strategy, which is a very good one, I think, to reduce their own carbon footprint on their end in scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3, of course. So those things, those are the two sides of the same coin, the reduction for the companies to produce flowers or products and to also support households that give them access to clean cooking devices.
Thanks.
Yeah, I have no question. I just wanted to share an experience. Peter Renner from the Foundation Development and Climate Alliance from Germany. What we learned from our project partners is that high-ranked compensation projects, which has a highly spin-off to the Agenda 2030, creates also income and a better living standard and a better food security. So the combination from high-ranked compensation projects in terms of climate protection projects, especially in the nature-based solutions area, and the Agenda 2030 is helping the communities in the different countries quite well. And that is, I think, a very important, and in the whole discussion from the last month, quite neglected point of view which I would like to stress here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Another extra question, comment from the audience? Yep, Cordaid.
Thank you so much. So my question is, would it be possible for smallholder farmers from the global south, for example, from my country, Morocco, with piece of land of 5 hectares or 10 hectares, verify their piece of land with the standard, and if so, what would be the cost, more or less, and how much carbon in general, how much carbon credits in general would it be able to issue?
Yeah, that's a good question. We work with farmers, with larger groups of farmers. I mean, the certification process that you need to go through is for your farm. I don't know how well you earn, but it is probably a bit on the high end. So you have to group, and that's why the standard fits well with the Fairtrade principles of cooperative farming. So normally in our type of projects, we reach at least 5,000 farmers to jointly apply for this Fairtrade climate standard projects. And if you have a farm of 5 hectares, or yeah, then I don't know, we can have a meeting afterwards to see if it is feasible. But in general, to get carbon credits, you need larger volumes of households producing or reducing emissions. And it's not just that you get credits from doing anything, but you need to reduce your carbon emissions in order to get carbon credits. And maybe you don't use fertilizers anymore, but then to make it substantial, you need to reduce a lot.
Thank you. Another question from the audience? No? Okay, so maybe now we move to questions from us. So I want to ask, maybe starting from Olivia, if you want to address questions to us in this dynamic conversation, and feel free to start.
Yes, thank you, Juan Pablo. I was just wondering, Nira, you mentioned in your presentation about climate neutrality, that it's not a claim, or that companies shouldn't claim it for them. What do you think? What is the alternative? What are other options? And what do you think about contribution claims, maybe, as an alternative?
You already answered the question, no. Yeah, we feel we are struggling with the message of climate neutral, net zero, because if you look at your company, you sometimes it seems like overclaiming, and also if you include your historic footprint, it's really something you can't really prove. So I agree with you that you should contribute to speeding up the carbon reductions elsewhere, so that you, in the future, I see more space for contributions, so that a company is not claiming climate neutrality with their purchase of carbon credits, but that they say, I contributed X amount, so much benefits to speeding up the global carbon emission reductions. So it's not about offsetting, it's not about compensation, because in the end it is net zero. I mean, we need to go down altogether. So you need end reduction objectives, and you need to set serious targets and do it, because the target setting is not the difficult part. The difficult part is to reduce. And then you can contribute to bring people in who suffer from climate change to get access to funding that is needed for their livelihoods. And that is the system we see for the future. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So now, Nira, you want to ask a question to some of us?
Yeah, I'm very interested in the in the development of the Fairtrade climate standard. And I know the Fairtrade standard itself took a long time to take off. And it is not, I mean, if you talk about trade and fair trade, it took like, I don't know, that's my question to you. How long did it take you to bring fair trade to a sort of new normal? Because that would be my dream, to be, to have all carbon credits traded in a fair way. So then we could exist to, we could stop to exist, and it would be a sort of new normal practice that you have fair trade carbon credits. How long did it take you?
I think that's a share that we share in all commodities, not only carbon credits. But well, the first 5 years, and again, from the analysis, the impact assessment, these first 5 years were kind of a learning curve. Now we had collected a lot of learnings that are going to be incorporated in the revision of the standard. I mentioned the revision of the standard is going to start probably in December. So actually we have to discuss that together with the gold standard to integrate their common goals, the framework for common goals more boldly upfront, not just the, let's say, requirements we have in the past for restoration, afforestation, and so forth. So I think that the connection between fair trade gold standard is there to be strengthened, to increase more of these fair elements into trading carbon credits. But we don't want to stop there. Also with gold standard, we have been in conversations with IUCN to integrate the nature-based solution standard into our logic of operation. We see that in carbon markets, there's a momentum for carbons generated through nature-based solutions. And we think that, well, it's also good to start thinking how nature-based solutions can be there for the benefits of the communities and the farmers and the fair way. And therefore, issues like, for instance, how to set a price that can reward exactly the benefits that will generate the incomes necessary in the communities to scale these opportunities. So the standard is going to be reviewed. We are going to start this December, actually, after COP. And hopefully we follow, for those that doesn't know, we follow the codes of conduct of ICCO. So we will go step by step in a public consultation, hopefully before the summer next year. So please be aware that, well, we will be going to a public consultation, and all the feedback that we will receive will be analyzed and considered. Once the feedback from the public is considered from our proposals, then this will be submitted to our standards committee, that is an independent party that will accept or not according to the inputs that we receive from the public consultation. So hopefully, maybe, I don't want to know, but I don't want to say, but maybe next year we can announce a new standard. But the intention, the intention is to scale as much as possible with communities and with the SPOs. And now, Ines, you want to raise a question to some of us?
Sorry. I want to ask Nera. Okay. I want to ask you, on your point of view, what is the best tree with a carbon credit that we can plant for net zero? Is it Paulownia, bamboo? What is on your point of view? This is a question. And the second, as producers, you think, or the farmers, they always, there is the standard, and we want to be conform to the standards, but you think, always when we speak as producer, we want support or finance to uphold this, to lead to this action on climate action. But what you think that NGO can offer as support for the farmers, for the net zero options to adopt?
Yeah. The last question, we work as a sort of social enterprise. So we, if there is interest from our side to develop a project, we could pre-finance some of the carbon project in general, and we need to exchange what that would look like. And talking about your question about which crops are best for carbon credit projects. I mean, we are mostly working with cookstove projects because you generate carbon reductions, and with nature-based solutions and with planting of trees and soil carbon, we did some research on it. It is very hard and very costly to prove your impact. And so we're at this moment a bit reluctant to go into the investing our funds into nature-based solutions, because you don't know very well about the permanence and the assessment of the carbon sequestration that you generate is very intensive. So, but on average, they say that bamboo and mangroves and fast-growing trees are the best. But if you grow tomatoes, there is not a net sequestration, because tomatoes produce, they sequester carbon in their leaves and in the stem and in the roots. But as soon as you remove it, it decomposes again. So there is not a net carbon emission reduction. So that with annual plants, you don't have much sequestration potential.
Thanks. Deborah?
Yes, thank you so much. I will have a recommendation and then a question as well. So, looking at the premium pricing, whether it's low or high, I will recommend, as we always talk about climate funding, to also make sure we consult producers, because planting a tree takes a longer time, and it involves a lot of cost for a producer to plant till the maturity stage. And so sometimes you consider a price being fair, but when you compare with the cost a producer incurs before maturity, there's a gap. So I will suggest and recommend, maybe you've done that already, but it's also a second reminder that if a premium or a funding is being given on a carbon benefit, we also look at the producer's costs incurred. And then number two, I think for all fair trade producers, there's a need to enroll them with a climate standard, because one way or the other we are planting, and so we must get the benefit from it. It wouldn't be that producers are just planting, reducing emission, and then we are not getting anything because we are not, or we have no idea about the climate standard. So I think for my recommendation, it should be part of the fair trade standard, and then producers are introduced to the tracking, and then at the end of it, they get benefit from what they have also put in place. My question is for producers, what we fear most is political interference when it comes to our funding and then benefits that has to come to us. How is this addressed in the climate carbon credit financing? If there's any political interference, how would it be addressed to make sure producers get the benefits that they deserve, and it doesn't go to a government used for any other project? Yeah, thank you.
You want to take that?
Yeah, I could take it. No, I agree with how political interference can safeguard the income generation for farmers, and that is, it is a tedious process, because you need to negotiate with governments and you don't know about carbon credits as a farmer. I mean, that's what we see in a lot of cases. Also, if you although they're good examples, and we need to bring more capacities to farmer producers, I think, and that is something on the table for us and for Fairtrade also, to see how you can really capture the knowledge at the farm level in order to negotiate with partners using carbon credits. And I know several examples of carbon project developers approaching farmers, and they promise funds or income, and the farmers need to do the work, and they're not rewarded, like you say. And that's a tricky game. I mean, the costs are on the farmer's shoulder, and before you know, you sign something, and the credits will go to the project developers. So there is a need for capacity in Africa, amongst farmers, to know how the system works, because it becomes a very valuable asset in the future that you could really use as an income for bringing more resilience to your farm. And it's a complex matter, and that is the problem with carbon credit and all the processes, and that's a general given that you need to go through all these processes in order to get it. And that is part of the Fairtrade approach, that we look from the point of view of the producers and not from the point of view of the project developers and the investors, because you cannot split your money. I mean, it's either it goes to the investor or it goes to the farmers. It cannot go both sides. But with the growing markets, there is room for more money to the local communities.
Thanks. So I take homework with me. Thank you, Deborah. But no, I think that increasing education of farmers on how carbon markets is a responsibility that, yes, we take seriously, and I think other actors that are in this business should also take seriously. That leads me to my question to you, Dr. Henke. How the platform supports transparency in generating these credits to the network partners? What kind of mechanisms, let's say, can, from the German perspective, be there to enable also the uptake of these initiatives?
Yeah, interesting question. Thanks, Juan Pablo. Yeah, we try to have dialogues with our offset partners about the project on the one hand side, and we also have a environmental and social management system, and with that system we trying to prove our offset partners. In this year, now we had a first round, and it was more like the easy way into the system, but next year we will have a really assessment of all of our offset partners, and then we going to look into their quality and look how which standards they support, which projects they have in their portfolio, and if they don't succeed the screening, then they won't be listed as an offset partner any longer. And on the other side, we are talking to the companies that are offsetting and trying to raise awareness about the prices on the one hand side, and as well that they have to ask their offset partners how they produce the credits and which standards they are working with, and as well how much money they earn from like selling the credits. And it's a question that we can't actually ask the offset partners, but have the companies ask the offset partners when they are buying the credits from them. And so it's kind of a dialogue, and I think every year that we are now working with them, it would be a bit harder for them.
Thank you. I want to look back to the audience if there's some comment, question still. Okay. Well, no, thank you so much. I think we are coming to the close of the session. And now I would like to just invite each of the panelists to make a final remark. And maybe we can start with you, Deborah? A final remark?
Yes, so thank you so much. It's good. Producers are not just looking at government and organization changing their policies and work phases to reduce emission. But we are also taking action. But what I can say is the action we are taking comes with a cost, and there's a need for funding to support producers, extend this action to make sure in our own way, and then we can improve on carbon, reduce emission, and then also support in any other ways possible to adapt to this climate change, to make sure there's food on the table for everyone now and then future to come. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deborah. Ines?
Thank you so much. I think in the COP here, 27, we are here as producer to raise our voice and to say the clock is ticking. Yeah, Fairtrade raised this slogan to say that the clock is ticking, and everyone from his place, if producers or organization, NGO, and farmers and government, should all of us work on the climate action that I hope that after this conference we have achievements and action points, then we align all in future more fair point of climate fairness. Thank you.
Thank you. Mira?
Great statement. No, I want to be very brief. I want all the markets, all the voluntary carbon markets to be fair and inclusive and paying for mitigation and adaptation at the same time.
Thank you so much from my side as well. I found it very interesting. I've learned a lot today. Thanks for sharing your perspectives. And I think my point taken today was actually we do need a premium on every carbon credit we sell, and not only for the freight trade, but for every carbon credit, so that we have money for adaptation and financing the most vulnerable communities with that.
Thank you. On my side, I think three main things. Carbon credits, carbon markets should be there to upscale community-based innovations. This is something important, how the carbon can react to foster innovations in the communities. Second, carbon markets have been set for mitigation, but we need more carbon finance for adaptation, or carbon markets reacting also for adaptation. And the third is that carbon is one part of the package, the other parts of the co-benefits and the biodiversity and the water. So these are other elements that also needs to be considered in implementing this project further. Those are my main takeaways. Thank you so much. But before asking for your hands, I would like to say, as a man, very honored to share the panel with powerful women. Thank you so much.